Hello. So, whenever I do one of my D&D videos, about half of the comment section tends to be filled with the exact same question. How do you make the tokens? What filter do you use? How did you get those backgrounds? Is that made with AI? Oh, that's probably made with AI, isn't it? Etc, etc, etc. But no, they are they are in fact not made with AI. And as a little quick prelude for my next big D&D video, which is coming very soon, I wanted to make this isolated little quick walkthrough to how I create digital tabletop tokens for D&D. Let's settle this question once and for all, okay? So, the first step, quite obviously, is creating a character, a model, so to say. Now, there are a lot of different kinds of top-down tokens, but if you are like me and you use either like Roll20 or Foundry or some other digital tabletop thing, chances are that your models are going to need to fit within a square tile. Now, this part matters because that tile will bring limitations and restrictions that define what your final token will eventually look like, right? So what do I mean by that? Okay, quick explanation. Let's say, as I have done before, you are creating a big size demanding barbarian Goliath, and then you're also creating a little gnome wizard. If both of these are going to fit into a tile, you can't fill the whole space with the gnome because then it will look as big as the Goliath, or the Goliath will look really small. This is the annoying part, right? But it's important to bear in mind and make sure that you compare model sizes before you export your final renditions, but we'll get to all of that later on. Anyway, our example model for now is going to be a skeleton knight, so definitely on the bigger side. It will be designed to look cool primarily from the top-down perspective, which is why you're going to see me panning the camera up and down all the time while I'm making this, but anyway, let's get that done and then we'll get back to business after the model is finished. Now, this video here isn't really a build video, right? Nor is it about this model or this character specifically, but to give some context anyway, it was originally meant to be the character that I would play in the first Warhammer D&D campaign we made. But it turned out to be very incompatible, so it didn't last long at all, which is why I brought in Gunnar, etc. Anyhow, he was meant to be a very crude, greedy, and glory-seeking knight who, after completing a cool adventure, was unceremoniously murdered by a peasant with a crossbow. But he was literally too angry to die, so eventually he came back as a skeleton, which is why he's designed to look, very worn down, but simultaneously clad in pretty fancy armor. So imagine like a nice suit of chainmail with added heraldry, blah 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 blah, except it's all kind of been laying in the dirt for a while. Now, since our current D&D campaign is very much in its like late endgame stages, there's been some talks about potentially going back to the old setting that we played in, so maybe maybe Sir Jean-Pierre Croissant here will get his much deserved comeback. No, please don't comment on my French pronunciation. Anyway, we will see. That's all later down the line. And okay, there we go, a fairly straightforward skeleton knight. So this is where we are going to be creating 3 separate versions of this model. So we have originally the basic Hero Forge token, and then we're going to have a top-down version and eventually the portrait version. So we start by doing some very basic booth stuff just to spice the look up a bit. I really don't want to overuse the booth effects here because like that's not the point of this video, right? And most of the booth things can't really be applied to a token anyway. And before we go any further, I might get the obvious question here. Do you need Hero Forge Pro to do all this? And no, okay, so the booth is a quality of life thing. It makes it easier to export transparent images, which is what we're going to need, but you can use other sources to make a Hero Forge like screenshot transparent as well. So it's not absolutely necessary, no. Anyway, like I said, we now save as to create a copy and we start working on the top-down version. This is where I start making a bunch of weird silly little edits like changing the lighting and the pose of different items and limbs, often in ways that make no sense at all but will make the model look slightly better specifically from top down. And once we've done that, all we do is give the model a slight black outline in the booth and export it with a transparent background. Voila! Finally, thirdly, the portrait version we save as to create another copy, because we're going to be making some edits here as well. For example, I move the little shield heraldry up to make sure that it's included in the portrait. I add some extra effects to the face and the helmet. And most importantly here, I add some red lighting to his face. Simply because I know that the background color I will use for the portrait later on will be red, and you know, red glow, red background, it makes it all gel together much better. Okay, so we have our 2 exported images, top down and the portrait version. This is where we head into Photoshop. And yes, I know, just like with Hero Forge Pro, not everyone is gonna have access to Photoshop, right? I know that there are other free ways you can filter images, but I do not use them myself, so unfortunately I cannot provide a guide to that. Anyway, once imported, we go into Filter Gallery and we apply a filter called Poster Edges. The amount of times I've had to say that to questions on Reddit, I swear to God. Anyway. So how posterized you want the image to be, right? How much edge thickness, etc. These are all customizable things with this poster. That's all up to you. I tend to just go 333, but whatever, it's your choice. We applied this to both the portrait and the top-down version. And then for the top-down version specifically, the one that will remain transparent, we make an extra layer and throw on some low opacity black shadow. The shading, which then goes underneath the model, will go a long way in making the character look real and part of the setting. As for the portrait, it's time to actually make a background. Again, with Hero Forge Pro, you could just use one of the booth backgrounds if you like, but I prefer these ones. This style of background that I've been using for my D&D party now was created using a few specific Photoshop brushes and lighting techniques which were taught me by Zaf, so I cannot take full credit for it, right? But you'll see the process on screen here. And once the background is done, we simply overlay the portrait, add a simple black border around it on another layer, and done. There you go. You now have 3 basic versions of the same model, the main model itself, the top-down token, and the portrait. And this is the part where you go into the comments and you call me a fraud and you say that you still believe it was all AI. Anyway, I digress. I hope that this has proved useful for you, and like I said, big proper D&D video will be out very soon, and thank you for watching. Speaking of which, I want to give a massive special thanks to my Patreon subscribers: Stout Dross, Camelius, Nicholas A. Paul, Ken Hayes, Ghost to GM, Deus Mercurius Magna, Where the Box, Hidden Squid, Dread97, Mike Horst, Amaryllis, Narelon, Gesteig Panzer, Bob Bobinson, The Old Fossil, Axe Momo, and Vin Penny. With all of that said, see you all next time.